Hello students, Namaste to all. I am Dr. Harit Meena from Central University of Punjab. Today, I will introduce you a topic that is CRIPS mission, Wavel plan and cabinet mission. For the first time, the British officials authoritatively defined their goal in 1917 during World War I. Following the end of World War II, Britain made the decision to cede control to Indian forces and to leave the country. India's protracted independence movement ended in success in 1947 when the nation was freed from 150 years of British domination. It was the irony of freedom struggle that it resulted in the bloodiest and the most violent division of the nation, killing 2 million civilians and uprooting countless millions. There were many fast-moving events during the 12 years between 1935 and 1947, which ended British control in India and resulted in the formation of two independent states. During the Second World War, political unrest replaced the peaceful environment of the country, resulting in years of catastrophe. The British government entered into a number of political negotiations throughout these historic years. But because of their unfair or unreasonable aims, the political deadlock persisted until the fourth decade of the 20th century. Now in this story, the first mission which came to India, it was CRIPS mission, which came in India in March 1942, and we will discuss the clauses and consequences of this mission. Building on the Round Table Conferences, the Simon Commission, and the earlier Government of India Act of 1919, the Government of India Act 1935 mandated the creation of an All India Federation in order to give Indians more power in the highest level of administrative mechanism. But progress had been hampered by pronounced disagreements between the Muslim League and the Congress, as well as between the princely states and the Congress. Rather, the Act's provincial provisions were the only one implemented. During Second World War, as Japan was moving beyond India's eastern frontiers, the British were taken aback by Burma's collapse in the war. India was in imminent danger of Japanese invasion, and India's assistance to Britain during the war was very crucial. Viceroy Lord Linlithgow proclaimed India as a party in the war as a part of the British Empire when the Second World War broke out in 1939. The Congress Party staged widespread protests in response to this action, which was taken without consulting the Indian population. The party leaders, who headed 7 province governments, tendered their resignation, and the day was observed as a Deliverance Day by Muslim League. Leaders of the US and other allies put pressure on Britain regarding its own imperial policies in India and to win India's support for the Allied war effort. With the aim of resolving India's political deadlock, Prime Minister Churchill sent a mission to India in March 1942 under the leadership of British Parliament member and Labour Party leader Sir Richard Stafford Cripps. However, the real purpose of this mission was to coax the Indians into cooperating in the war. Sir Cripps was also a member of the British War Cabinet and actively supported the Indian national movement. While on the other hand, Britain had to face a crushing defeat in Southeast Asia, on the other hand, the fear of Japan's attack on India was increasing day by day. Under these circumstances, Britain didn't see any hope of India's support. Britain was being pressurized by the Allies, which constituted America, Soviet Union, and China, to get India's support. Indians had accepted support to the Allies on the condition that there should be immediate transfer of solid, responsible governance of India and a promise to give complete independence to India after the war. Cripps conducted a press conference and made his materials available on March 29th. Now we would discuss the main provisions of the Cripps mission. And in this segment, the first was an Indian Union will be established with the status of a dominion state. This union will be independent in determining its relation with the Commonwealth, and the United Nations will determine its own role in other international bodies and institutions. After the end of the war, a constituent making council will be formed to draft a new constitution. Some of its members will be elected by the provincial legislatures, and some will be nominated by the kings in the princely states. Third, the British government will accept the new constitution made by the constitution making council subject to the following conditions. And in these conditions, the first was those provinces which do not accept the constitution made by the constituent makers will have the right to separate from the Indian Union. The separated provinces will have the right to make their own separate constitution. The princely states will also have similar rights. And the second clause was the newly formed constitution making council and the British government will resolve the issue of transfer of power and protection of the interests of the racial and religious minorities through mutual agreements. The fourth clause was, till the above arrangement is made, Britain will discharge the security related responsibility of India and will control and direct the security of the country, and all the powers of the Governor General will remain as before. In his presidential speech to the Muslim League on April 4th, Jinnah made it clear that Cripps' suggestions were merely a draft proclamation. Additionally, he stated that the draft declaration and Sir Stafford's explanation went against Muslim interests. The main objective and suggestion were a new Indian Union, and the creation of Pakistan was a remote possibility. He requested that Cripps make changes so that the demand for Pakistan desire would actually be fulfilled. During a news conference on April 13, 1942, he made note of the fact that the demand for Pakistan was not explicitly accepted and that Muslims' right to self-determination was also ignored. The Muslim League, for this reason, rejected these recommendations. Later on, Jinnah took aim at the British government and the Congress party for holding yet another round of negotiations while excluding the Muslim League. Okay, students, now we will consider the major causes due to which Cripps mission failed. The proposal of the Cripps mission failed to satisfy the Indian nationalists and could not get the consent of any section of Indians in general. Various organizations and groups opposed these proposals on different grounds. Congress opposed the proposal due to the following reasons, and among them the first was the arrangement to give India the status of dominion state instead of complete independence. Likewise, the system of nomination instead of elections for representative of native states. The third argument they made was the arrangement for the provinces to separate from the Indian Union and make a separate constitution, which was against the principle of national unity. The fourth reason was lack of plan for quick transfer of power and absence of arrangement for real participation in the issue of defense. The supremacy of the Governor General was undone, and the demand of making the Governor General only the constitutional head was not accepted. On behalf of Congress, Jawaharlal Nehru and Maulana Abul Kalam Azad were appointed for examination and discussion in the context of Cripps mission. The Muslim League also rejected the proposals of the Cripps mission and gave some of the arguments in favor of their failure. The first among them was the system of a single Indian Union was not acceptable to it. The second reason, the basis laid down for the formation of Constitution Making Council was not acceptable to it, and the League also disagreed with the method laid down for the provinces to separate from the Union and make their own constitution. They raised their voice for the third segment. It was the principle of self-determination of Muslims and the demand for a separate Pakistan were not accepted in the proposals. Other prominent political parties also opposed giving the provinces the right to secede from the Union. Liberals believed that giving the provinces the option to secede from the Union was against the unity and security of India. Hindu Mahasabha also criticized this provision. Dalits estimated that after partition, they would have to live at the mercy of majority Hindus. The opposition of the Sikh was based on the fact that in case of partition, Punjab would be lost from them. Aggregates said that this plan is a version of August proposal of 1940, which have been made more clear by Cripps. Cripps' failure to win the confidence of India by coming forward with the proposal and their saying take it or leave it were the main reasons for the deadlock. Initially, Cripps talked about the formation of the cabinet and the establishment of the national government, but later he retracted his words and started saying that he meant only the expansion of the Executive Council of Governor General. The provision regarding the arrangement for merger or separation of provinces was unclear. The proposal to separate from the Union had to be approved by 60% of the members in the legislature. If less than 60% of the members support the proposal, then it will have to be passed by a simple majority of the adult male of the province. This arrangement was particularly harmful for the Hindus of Punjab and Bengal, even though they wanted to join the Indian Union. It was also unclear in the mission's proposal as to who would implement and who would interpret the provisions related to transfer of power. The real intention of the British government was that the Cripps mission should not be successful, because mission was against both the transfer of power to Indians and participation in the defense responsibilities of the country. Prime Minister Churchill, Emre, Linlithgow and Wavel also didn't want the Cripps mission to succeed. Only after the war, when the military troops were demobilized, the long-term implications of Cripps mission became explicitly clear. Even Churchill acknowledged that Cripps' offer of freedom could not be withdrawn. But by the end of the war, he was out of power and had to watch helplessly as the new Labour administration led by Clement Attlee granted India its independence. Congressmen were so sure that the British would soon leave that they were prepared to stand in 1945-46 elections and form regional governments. Talks broke down between Stafford Cripps and Congress leaders on the issue of Viceroy's veto. Commenting on the Cripps proposal, Gandhiji said that it was a post-dated check which was going to destroy the bank. Regarding the Cripps proposal, Jawaharlal Nehru said that accepting the Cripps plan was paving the way for dividing India into indefinite parts. As a friend of Nehru and a Labour Party member, Cripps tried his hardest to come to a compromise. However, there was simply too much mistrust and numerous influential individuals who had a stake in the outcome of negotiations. Thus, Stafford Cripps returned to England, leaving India in an environment of despair and uncertainty. Indians who still harbored in their mind the picture of complete sympathy towards the victim of fascist aggression began to feel betrayed by the attitude of the British government. Now, Indians began to believe that the present condition had become unbearable and it had become necessary to strike a final blow against imperialism. Now, after the unsuccessfulness of Cripps, we will discuss about the Wavel plan, its clauses and consequences. As we know, Wavel came in India in June 1945, and the British Empire faced numerous socio-economic challenges as a result of the Second World War, particularly in the management of their overseas territories. As a result, the British government decided to give India the independence it had long sought. Furthermore, the British position in India was apparently unstable due to the Quit India movement and a rise in revolutionary activities. After becoming Viceroy in 1943, Lord Wavel was tasked with coming up with a plan for future Indian administration that would satisfy the All India Muslim League and the Indian National Congress, facilitating a peaceful handover of power. Because he had led the Indian Army, Lord Wavel was thought to be a suitable candidate for this position due to his superior knowledge of the Indian context. In 1945, the Wavel plan was initially introduced at the Simla Conference. It bears Lord Wavel's name as the Viceroy of India. The Wavel plan for Indian self-government, which called for distinct representation along communal lines, was the subject of the Simla Conference. Although the Second World War in Europe had reached its end in May 1945, the fear of Japan's attack on India still remained. The Conservative government in Britain, under the leadership of Prime Minister Churchill, wanted that the constitutional question in India should be resolved somehow. That is why Viceroy Wavel was asked to discuss and try to reach a compromise in this regard with the leaders of India. In June 1945, all the Congress leaders were released from jail. Elections were to be held in England in mid-1945. The Conservatives wanted to show that they were serious about solving the problem. There was constant pressure being put on Britain from various nations to get India's support. The government wanted to divert the energy of Indians in such a direction where it could be beneficial for the British. On the behalf of the government, a proposal was presented to reconstitute the Viceroy executive until a new constitution is made. For this purpose, Viceroy Wavel called a conference in Shimla in June 1945, in which Congress, Muslim League and others participated. The main provisions of the Wavel plan has to be discussed thoroughly, and the first among them was, except for the Governor General and the Commander-in-Chief, all members of the Governor General's executive will be Indians. Second, the number of Hindus and Muslims will be kept equal in the council. The third provision was, the reconstituted council will function as an interim government within the framework of the Act of 1935. The fourth among them was, although the prohibition power of the Governor General will not be abolished, it will not be necessarily to use it. The fifth was, a joint meeting of political parties will be convened so that a unanimous list can be presented for the appointment of the executive. But if consensus cannot be reached on this issue, then separate list should be presented for this work. The sixth clause of Wavel plan was, it was fully expected that as soon as Britain achieved a decisive victory in the war, the necessary process of framing a constitution would be started. On June 25, 1945, Lord Wavel invited 21 major figures, including Mahatma Gandhi and Muhammad Ali Jinnah, to Shimla, the British India summer capital, to debate the Wavel plan. The Congress and the League were unable to resolve their differences, which is why the meeting was a disaster. The Muslim League wanted that the League itself should be considered the representative of all Muslims and there should not be any Muslim outside the Muslim League in the list of the Viceroy. 6 of the Wavel plan's 14 members were Muslims, more than the percentage of Muslims in the general community. In spite of this, the League desired the ability to veto any constitutional amendment that it felt didn't serve its interests. The League was afraid that the minority group would include representatives of scheduled castes, Sikhs, and Christians, etc., due to which the number of Muslims in the proposed executive will be reduced to only 1/3. More importantly, Wavel wanted to keep Malik Khijr Hayat Khan of the Unionist Party of Punjab, who was not a member of the Muslim League in the executive. Congress opposed the Wavel plan, saying that it is an attempt to keep the image of Congress as a pure upper caste Hindu party. Apart from this, Congress had also demanded that it should be given the right to nominate members of all sects in the nomination of its members. The position of the Muslim League became stronger after Wavel ended the Shimla conference unsuccessfully. Due to this, the League became stronger and grew in an unparalleled manner, the proof of which was found in the election in 1945-46. Wavel's move also greatly improved Jinnah's position and exposed the conservative government of Britain led by Prime Minister Churchill. In a sense, the Wavel plan called for the full Indianization of the Executive Council. However, rather than requesting nominations from all parties and communities, seats were set aside for members based on caste and religion, with Muslim and Hindus participation. The term caste Hindus offended even Mahatma Gandhi. The plan called for immediate adjustment to the Executive Council's makeup, but it included no mention of a future Constituent Assembly as a guarantee of Indian independence or suggestions for how the country's political parties would share the power. Following this, the Second World War came to a conclusion and Britain elected a new Labour government. This new government sent the cabinet mission with the intention of giving India independence as soon as possible. Now, my dear students, we will discuss about the main provisions, the clauses and consequences of cabinet mission. In order to preserve India's unity and grant it independence, a cabinet mission visited India in 1946 to discuss the handover of power from the British government to the political leadership of India. The British Prime Minister Clement Attlee pioneered the formation of the mission, which included Sir A.V. Alexander, Sir Stafford Cripps, and Lord Patrick Lawrence, who was the Secretary of State for India. The British government sent cabinet mission to India on March 23 of 1946. On coming to India, the cabinet mission concluded that the root of the constitutional problem in India is communalism. Congress was not ready to accept the principle of equality between Hindus and Muslims for the formation of a temporary government. The suggestion of the Congress for the Constitution Assembly was that the central legislatures should be considered as the electoral units and the representatives of the princely states should be elected by the Praja Mandals, which was also known as People's Movement in the states or provinces. Jinnah continued to insist on the demand for Pakistan at this time. That is why the cabinet mission proposed that a constituent assembly should be formed in which the interests of the minorities would be respected. The cabinet mission proposed the formation of a constituent assembly on the basis of representatives in the provinces of British India instead of direct elections by the people. As soon as the cabinet mission came to India, it started talks with other parties beside the Congress and the League. In 182 meetings, total 745 Indian leaders were talked and their views were sought. Now, dear students, we will discuss the main proposals which were laid down by the cabinet mission. And the first among them was an Indian confederation would be formed by combining British India and the princely states. This union will have three departments: foreign, defense, and communications, and will have the right to collect funds for these departments. The remaining subjects and powers will be with the states. Similarly, the executive and legislature will be formed by representatives of British India and the princely states. The second clause which was forwarded by cabinet mission was each province will have the right to form a group with a separate executive and legislature, and each group will have the right to decide regarding the provincial subjects to be placed under its control. The Constituent Assembly will be elected on the basis of the number of members of the provincial assemblies and the population of the province. One representative was arranged for every 10 lakh persons. In the electoral process, three classes were considered, which were Muslims, Sikhs, and the others, that included Hindu also. According to this principle, total 292 members for the Constituent Assembly are elected from the Indian provinces. Third clause, an Antrim government will soon be established with the help of all parties, in which all departments will remain with the Indian leaders. After the transfer of power, the supreme power relating to Indian states will neither remain with England nor with India. Even princely states will discuss with the Constituent Assembly about their existence in the future, and in the meanwhile, these princely states will have representation in the Constituent Assembly. On the basis of the proposals of the cabinet mission, at first the Indian National Congress refused to participate in the government but accepted to join the Constituent Assembly. The Muslim League initially accepted the proposal of cabinet mission but later withdrew its acceptance due to Congress joining the Constituent Assembly and Muslim League withdrawing its acceptance. The Viceroy formed the executive committee without the representation of the League. Describing this step taken by the Viceroy as unfair, the League called for Direct Action Day on 16th September of 1946 in protest against it. On 2nd September 1946, Jawaharlal Nehru and his colleagues took oath as members of the Viceroy Council. This council started working as a cabinet under the leadership of Nehru. Lord Wavel informed Jawaharlal Nehru that the Muslim League had accepted joining the Constituent Assembly on 9th December 1946 in the absence of Muslim League. The Constituent Assembly was formed under the chairmanship of Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who later presented his plan under which the partition of India and Pakistan was approved. Now, dear students, after cabinet mission, what had happened to in India? In a conclusion, we can say that the British government sent the Cripps mission to India in March 1942 in an attempt to secure Indian support for their war operations in the Second World War. In charge of the Cripps mission was scrapped because the plans were deemed to be too radical and conservative. After Stafford Cripps left, the Indian people became resentful and frustrated, while Indian political leaders continued to sympathize with the victims of fascist aggression. But at the same time, they believed that the country's current state was untenable and that a last offensive movement against imperialism was necessary. Due to the mission's failure, Indians refused to aid Britain in the war effort, which sparked the national Quit India movement. After Wavel plan, the cabinet mission was a brilliant scheme to prevent the partition of India and create a constituent assembly. Even so, it was unsuccessful because of the divergent viewpoints of Indian National Congress and Muslim League. Thank you, my dear students. It was a wonderful talk. It was a wonderful interaction. Meet you in next topic of this lecture series. Thank you once again.